So Andre, thank you so much for talking to us, and you also wrote an article for the current issue of Contemporary Southeastern Europe. You're looking at village life in central Serbia. How come that you picked this as a focus of your research, your field work?
All right. I'm doing field research in that area since 2009. I picked it as member of an international research group that was looking at local state and social security in 3 countries, in Hungary, Romania, and Serbia, and in collaboration with the University of Belgrade. With Slobodan Naumovic, we chose this place, which is in central Serbia, which is a rural village, quite small, quite extended over a large area. And one of the key issues that emerged was actually how people are coming together and how they produce society in this environment.
How much? So maybe you can tell us a little bit, because you're looking at one particular family in particular and how they moved into agriculture. So not as in terms of like something which has been generations of agriculturalists, but rather them choosing this. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about this.
Okay, why I chose this particular family. Okay, first of all, I mean, because of the quality of the data that I got from them. They are quite well educated, and so let's say when you have an interview-based approach, it is more, which I'm partly using, but I'm also using participant observation. But when you want an interview-based approach, then it is also quite crucial that the informants are able to express their own points of view in such a manner that it that it doesn't have to be so much edited. But at the same time, they were very involved actors in the social scene, so it was a natural also choice. So they're not eccentric, but rather very sociable. So and they reproduce social networks. They kind of are active in reproducing the social landscape, or what, and I'm using the term of social security, production of social security to describe that aspect. So of course you can also enter the social security from a recipient's side, which is a very different tale, which is can be related to all kinds of traumas of the persons, and it's much more difficult. I mean, I chose this time in this article this approach.
So, I mean, you're critical of research which have often kind of looked at kind of categories of underdevelopment or backwardness and so on. So, how do you understand social relations? How do you understand this particular case and environment you're looking at?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I mean, I'm trying to contribute to economic anthropology and sociology or history of the area. That's why I'm re-narrating the story since the starting in the 1920s basically, but then focusing on the 1980s when this actor became adult, and then the 1990s and 2000s when he became an active member of this community. And underdevelopment itself is a bit too structuralist, has been a too structuralist approach, I would say. It has been used in the 1980s, has been also criticized. I think it's not a bad concept itself. It explains quite well some aspects of transformation in, as we say, peripheral or semi-peripheral societies. But we had the cultural turn in the 1980s, and we moved away from structuralism. So when we want to, and we actually did too little economic anthropology for a while and sociology. So when we want to come back to the field, we also should take something over from this critique. So and have a more open approach, and that's why the production of social relations, and the kind of social space, which I see as an open, emerging process, then. Hat sich angeboten, came as a good tool to think about transformation and change.
So, how much is this this change you're observing a result of the? Is it a coping strategy for people? I mean, moving into the agricultural sector which you're looking at, is it a coping mechanism based on the difficulty of finding a job and employment in the kind of transition period and the whole consequence of the dissolution of the Yugoslavia, sanctions and so on, or how does what story does this tell us, in fact, about understanding the broader picture of the kind of developments of Serbia in the last 20 years?
Yeah, it has definitely to do with coping strategies, at least in the beginning. And what I find so interesting is that that social actors have to cope with ruptures and dramatic changes every couple of decades, and especially that has kind of seems to have been accelerating from the 80s to the 90s, which with the war and with the breakup of a state, and then another war in 1999, which is also, you know, these, and they can be seen in the biographies of the actors. And then comes the third change is kind of the economic change from a self-managed socialism with its own problems towards a kind of liberal capitalism where regulation seems to be crucially underperformed by the state, and so kind of a decreasing number of jobs. And so people go back into agriculture, and then agriculture also becomes less and less viable, and they need to be very alert. And what is maybe most interesting, what has been described also as resilience, is that with every kind of when they come to certain bottlenecks and they have to kind of, or they come to a wall, they don't break, but they try to navigate it, to shift to another gear, to kind of go into a new production area. They perform solidary work exchanges, and they what I term moral appreciation. They revalue their friends. They help them when they're in problems, but they also revalue older production devices, like tractors, glass houses, etc. Especially, I'm talking about land and glass houses in this case, because it's about vegetable production in this specific case study.
I mean, one of the observations which sociological and other demographic studies always show is the depopulation of the countryside in Serbia in particular, but elsewhere. Populations move to Belgrade, to Novi Sad, to the big cities. How much is that a feature which you encountered in your fieldwork as people either moving away or thinking about moving away, seeing their future as not being permanent or not viable? So how does that development fit into your findings?
Yeah, so at the first point, it looks like paradoxical that I'm talking about people going to the village and not going to the big towns or going abroad. And I would say there can be a lot of explanations for that in this specific, but he's not the only case. So you have a couple of people who are, okay, they have a certain kind of resource and that they can fall back on. So definitely agriculture has been always a kind of a fallback option for workers. Maybe less so for intellectuals, although you also have a trend now around bigger cities where you have, biological, ecological production, where these people are trying to do something valuable for society and for themselves and produce agriculture. Okay, but he's doing a more, let's say, conventional modern approach to agriculture. So he's not a biological farmer. However, these are young families. They have children, and they actually revitalize. For example, by coming back to the village, they also have revitalized the school, for instance. And when the children get bigger, and the football club, which has been almost defunct but has been running for 40 years already, he's going into it, and he's also making it one of the more successful. More active football clubs in the area. So because there's maybe not a lot of people, so they don't reverse the demographic trends, but they definitely slow it down, and furthermore, they kind of revitalize village life.
How does in socialist Yugoslavia, there were afterwards a lot of debate has been about people who are both workers and peasants, right? I mean, this has been both used as a prerogative, as an insult, or saying that the workers aren't fully workers, but they're also peasants. But it's also been a survival strategy. How much is that still? I mean, is what you're looking at a reflection of the traces of that, or is that kind of observation of the worker / peasant a feature of the past, really, and the new ways of combining different roles emerging?
Yeah, I think that it's still a valid concept. It has been for sure changing. So what we find here, for example, is a representation of somebody who really sees himself as a worker in the third generation, basically. So they retain a minimum amount of land, which is at the very low end of what people actually own. Like the average is somewhere between 2 and 3, up to 4 hectares, and he owns merely 1 hectare. And his parents have been migrant workers in Berlin, West Berlin. So so he's really going into so normally you would have a strategy where in a household you would have one person who's fully in agriculture, normally the elder person, and the younger person is in the industry and supports. So, and I found still a lot of people who are more or less engaged like this, and they retain as I said, they retain agriculture as a kind of, pension option and so on. But here it's a bit a different case. So here it's the young generation that goes fully into agriculture. However, there are different movements in and out of this category. So here we have a kind of this specific case. He was not, but maybe his grandparents were Polutani, and he he could also go back into work in town and in the urban field if that would be for him a viable option. But at the moment it is not. So.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and background to your research. And it's a very fascinating article and case study of something which usually is not paid much attention to. So, Andre, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Florian. Goodbye.